Hey everyone! What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fusion Deck User in a different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 541, The Time of Forgetting. The World of the Forgotten? In a quiet fortune-telling parlor, Aster Phoenix sat on a stool, curiously examining the card. Sartorius sat across from him, gently shuffling his tarot deck, while his sister Serena poured tea for the two of them. Ever since the light of destruction had withdrawn its consciousness from Sartorius's body, he had gradually returned to his former self. Although his gift for predicting the future had lost the boost from the light of destruction, the talent itself hadn't disappeared. During this time, with Serena and Aster's help, the Society of Light's branches around the world had begun slowly restructuring and dissolving, and the three of them had gotten their lives back on track. Just as Aster had told Hikaru before, once everything settled down, he planned to go surfing and properly enjoy his new life. So during summer break, he'd barely participated in the Pro League at all. Aside from Society of Light business, he spent every day traveling the world, and occasionally moonlighting as Phoenix Man to catch muggers and thieves. Even though he'd already taken down his father's killer, he wasn't about to abandon that calling. He would continue fighting crime. As a result, his Pro League ranking had dropped another dozen or so places, but he didn't care. Despite all the relaxation, he was still a duelist at heart. After more than a month of unwinding, he felt he couldn't keep slacking off like this. He'd come to Sartorius to ask if there was somewhere he could go to get stronger. His original idea was to find some powerful duelists to challenge, since the half-completed Destiny hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer in his hand still hadn't been restored. He really wanted to finish the card, then either share it with Hikaru or make a copy. But when he posed the question, Sartorius performed a divination and gave him a different answer entirely. That answer was, the Dimension of the Forgotten. He asked in puzzlement, why would I go to a place like that? His style and deck didn't really align with that type of spirit. He'd actually been doing some dimensional travel recently, having visited a studio dimension where he obtained cards called Vision Hero. So he certainly wouldn't refuse dimensional travel. But the world of the forgotten. He was confused. For one thing, he had never abandoned any card. Even his elemental heroes were still hidden away in his deck. For another, he was a duelist who specialized in hero decks, and heroes might retire, but they would never be forgotten, because the world would always need heroes. How did this have anything to do with him? The divination points to this. Sartorius spoke gently to Aster. Rather, while you may not gain any cards there, you should encounter something even more wondrous, something that will make you stronger. Was that really possible? He thought it over. He didn't doubt Sartorius, but still had some lingering questions. Because the world of the forgotten apparently couldn't be reached via dimensional teleportation. Meanwhile, on a different front, in a massive office building, a man wearing prayer beads gently pushed up his glasses, then continued writing furiously, penning responses on document after document. A figure pushed open the office door, bowed in greeting, then stood to the side and addressed him. The new helmsman of the Princeton Group has been confirmed, Master Ramon. Here is the report. Thank you for your hard work, Echo. He nodded in acknowledgement. His name was Amon Garam, adopted son and eldest heir of the Garam Financial Group, and the representative of Duel Academy's Eastern Branch. Years ago, he had been taken in by his adoptive father while on the brink of death and raised as an heir. Later, when his adoptive father had a biological son, his position became somewhat awkward. Though he hesitated briefly, he soon resolved to support his younger brother. When his brother fell ill with an extraordinarily bizarre disease, Amon traveled far and wide seeking countless renowned doctors, even kneeling before them to beg for his brother's life. In the end, he successfully saved his brother, Sid. Because of this, he was actually held in high regard within the group. During the GX tournament, while he'd been interested in competing, his nature wasn't particularly competitive. So while in the Nexus dimension, he traversed mountains and rivers, tending to ordinary spirits and unlucky students. He barely participated in any matches, and ultimately left with only a passing grade before returning to school, drawing criticism from several professors at the Eastern Branch. Naturally, he didn't mind. However, his beloved, his partner Echo, didn't see things the same way. She had grown up alongside Amon and understood the goodness and sense of justice in his heart, as well as his magnanimity. She believed Amon was someone with talent, courage, and the vessel of a king, and had always felt frustrated that he could only serve as his brother's second-in-command. But she loved Amon deeply, so she would never directly try to change his mind. She simply, through indirect means and subtle methods, gently tried to nudge his thinking. "It's almost time." She glanced at her watch and spoke up. "The witching hour, then." The world of the forgotten. Said to be a dimension where abandoned and forgotten spirits reside, though some also described it as a world. It was a dimension similar to the Nexus. Supposedly, in any world, any existence that had been forgotten could potentially end up there. Within that world, countless monsters and spirits lay hidden. And those were existences worthy of salvation. That's right. Amon wasn't truly without desire. Quite the opposite, he had his own ideals and beliefs. He wished to build an equal world free of conflict, free of turmoil, where all lived in harmony. To that end, the forgotten spirits and abandoned cards in a place like the world of the forgotten were precisely the kind of beings he wanted to help. And that was exactly why Echo believed Amon would never refuse a trip to such a dimension. She knew more than Amon did. Through other channels, she had learned from a legendary duelist that the scope of abandoned cards was actually enormous, and the biggest point of all was the Exodia, the forbidden one that Weevil Underwood had thrown away. The cards belonging to the legendary King of Games were also among the forgotten. That was the strongest, most invincible power in the world. Assemble all 5 pieces, and not even the gods could stand against it. A genuine, absolute instant win. She believed that once Amon laid eyes on those cards, he would find a way to obtain that ultimate power and use it to build the most equal world possible. Without a doubt. However, entering the world of the forgotten wasn't that simple or casual. First, you needed a specific card, a card that granted access to the world of the forgotten. Such cards could practically only be obtained through 3 channels: Solomon Muto, grandfather of the King of Games Yugi Muto, Seto Kaiba, president of Kaiba Corp., and Maximilian Pegasus, president of Industrial Illusions. Pegasus's card had supposedly been given to a promising young hero duelist he was fond of. Solomon's card had been given to someone unknown. Even with the Garam Group's influence, they couldn't discover who had received it. Fortunately, while Seto Kaiba was notoriously unapproachable, as long as you could pique his interest or satisfy him, he'd toss out entry cards to dimensions he had no interest in without a second thought. So, leveraging the financial group's connections, they had successfully obtained one. The world of the forgotten couldn't be entered at just any time. Only those who had earned qualification, on a specific date and at a specific time, possessing sufficient dueling power or conviction, could successfully enter the witching hour. In other words, twilight. This was the time when ghosts and spirits were most active, the transition between day and night, the most fragile window. According to the standard time of the East 9th time zone, at the moment of twilight, you channeled your spirit energy into the card, and then you would feel suffocation and submersion. Amon raised the card, directed his spirit energy into it, and a massive vortex began spinning on the ground beneath him. The vortex was a peculiar kind of dimensional gateway. It could sense those with powerful desires or strong convictions in their hearts, or those who feared being forgotten, who dreaded vanishing entirely, and it would forcibly drag them into the deep water. Everything had been going smoothly for Amon, but for some unknown reason, the vortex beneath his feet suddenly spun wildly and expanded, as if it had sensed something. In an instant, it spread to the ground beneath Echo's feet. She let out a startled cry, and in the chaos, felt an intense suffocation. Then black tides surged in from all directions, engulfing her in an instant. In the frantic suffocation, she flailed her arms, trying to grab onto something. But before long, she felt something propping her up. "Are you all right, Echo?" Amon's voice slowly reached her ears. She opened her eyes to find herself on a vast, empty plain. The pitch-black earth stretched endlessly in every direction, and the entire world was as desolate as if nothing existed at all. She turned to see Amon steadying her. She nodded gently and struggled to her feet. So this was the world of the forgotten? She hadn't expected to be pulled into this world too. A suspicion formed in her mind, but she didn't let it show. Amon thought nothing of it and gazed into the distance. Directly ahead of them stood an enormous archway towering over this world. The gate looked ghastly. Countless skulls were embedded in and hung from it like decorations, or perhaps warnings. It resembled the legendary gates of the underworld, radiating waves of spectral energy, with icy, eerie gusts of wind sweeping through from time to time, sending chills down the spine. There was nothing else around them. It seemed there was only one direction to go, so as the two gradually regained their bearings, they walked toward the gate. But as they advanced, they gradually felt a creeping suffocation. The closer they got to the gate, the more pronounced the feeling became, as if some strange resistance was blocking their path. Amon pressed forward through the pressure with his powerful spirit energy. Echo, however, didn't possess such exceptional spiritual power. Yet in one particular moment, when the thought, "no matter what, I must help Amon," crossed her mind, the resistance on her body suddenly vanished. This world seemed to block anyone who lacked conviction or strength from advancing. Just as they were about to reach the gate, they were startled to discover that on the opposite side, a young man in a silver-white suit, looking refined and scholarly, was also braving the sandstorm and shadows, making his way toward the gate. "Oh? Whom?" Both parties instantly went on high alert. In a world of absolute emptiness, suddenly encountering another person, whether spirit or human, there was no guarantee the other party was without hostile intent. After all, in the world of the forgotten, there could well be countless beings harboring malice toward other life forms. There was no telling what they might do. If caught off guard by a sudden attack without preparation, it would be disastrous. Especially since both parties could feel that the closer they got to the gate, the greater the pressure on their bodies, and the worse their condition became. If ambushed right now, no one could guarantee they'd be able to fight at full strength. But after the initial tension, both sides simultaneously breathed a sigh of relief, because they could each sense that the other, at least for the moment, held no ill will. Amon studied the other person, thought carefully for a moment, and immediately recognized him. The celebrity pro-duelist, Aster Phoenix. Aster, after sizing up Amon, glanced at Echo, only to find that, from just that one glance, his body stiffened slightly. She was a woman with a somewhat tough exterior. Her hair was cropped very short, giving her an extremely clean and capable appearance. Honestly, among girls, she wasn't conventionally beautiful. But for some reason, the moment Aster laid eyes on her, his heart beat just a little faster. "Ha ha, Aster, that won't do at all." Suddenly, a voice interrupted the standoff between the two parties, snapping Aster back to reality. Everyone whipped their heads toward the gate at the same time. There, at some point they hadn't noticed, someone had already arrived ahead of them and was sitting there casually, waving hello. They hadn't noticed him. He got here faster than all of us. Who was this? All eyes turned to the gateway. Chief? Hikaru. The GX champion. Both parties exclaimed simultaneously. "Ha, good evening." Hikaru responded with a smile. "Didn't expect to run into people in another dimension. This is actually my first time encountering other travelers during a dimensional trip." Aster let out a breath of relief. Though somewhat surprised, once he'd gathered himself, he was still the same Aster. He figured that at least on the surface, it seemed to be 2 against 2 now, which would make handling any crisis easier. Amon and Echo, meanwhile, finally understood where the other 2 cards had gone. Clearly, Pegasus's card had gone to Aster Phoenix, and Solomon Muto's card had ended up in Hikaru's hands. But unfortunately, it looks like you'll have to wait for me to finish the trial first. Wait for you? Before either party could speak, both froze, then instantly understood. So that was how it worked. If multiple people fell into this dimension at the same time, the first person to reach the gate would be the first to undergo the trial. It was simple: whoever bore the greatest pressure, whoever could advance fastest under that pressure, was the one most capable of enduring being forgotten. Hikaru had arrived first. Naturally, he was the one among them with the greatest capacity to endure. The greatest? Amon couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Although he hadn't competed in the GX tournament, when duelists truly met, there was always an urge to measure themselves against one another. Heh, so it's you. Aster didn't mind. Sartorius had said he would grow stronger here. Perhaps it was because he'd run into Hikaru? He wasn't sure, but if Hikaru had gotten here faster and more steadily than him, then he had no complaints. After all, Hikaru could withstand even the pressure of the light of destruction. What was this by comparison? Hikaru pressed both hands against the gate. Looking upward from the base, the gate must have been dozens of meters tall. Hikaru pushed against it, and the entire structure didn't budge at first. But he didn't care. He kept pushing, and as he exerted more force, the gate slowly began to open. At the same time, endless dark energy poured out from within. Strange, smoke-like shapes, twisted and grotesque, flew from inside the gate and slammed into Hikaru. Rip. Crack. Tears appeared in his clothes. Scratches opened on his face. But he didn't care in the slightest. As the gate opened wider, countless dark shadows flew out and gradually surrounded the flat ground before the entrance. Echo rushed in front of Amon, wanting to shield him from the pain, but Amon simply steadied her and shook his head gently, telling her not to move. As the gate opened further, the pitch-black shadows gradually revealed their true forms. Key spirits, undead wraiths, attic goblins. Countless spirit images that looked intimidating but couldn't even leave a mark when they hit Hikaru. Filled with resentment and suffering, they flew out from the gate, then dissipated into the world. These were the grudges of countless cards, the agony of countless abandoned and forgotten cards. Their pain had coalesced into something almost tangible, like physical wounds. The three looked at Hikaru again. By now, the scratches and injuries from before had already vanished. Those fragile, weak spirits, how strong could they really be? What real scars could they leave? They were nothing more than pain made manifest. Still, the sheer enormity of that seemingly endless grief, like real wounds, brought suffering and made anyone want to recoil. Hikaru smiled as he pushed the gate open wide enough for three people to pass through. He shook out his hands casually, then walked forward with a grin, speaking as he went, "It's all right. Pain, resentment, regret, bring it all on. My name is Hikaru Amagi. Hikaru of Fusion. Hikaru of Duel Academy. Hikaru of the Ultimate. I don't care about pain. I don't care about grudges. I don't care about torment. As long as it leads to fusion, no matter what you are, I can accept you." Hikaru slowly inhaled, then declared into the infinite darkness beyond the gate. "So, spirits. Is there anyone willing to write a brand new chapter of fusion with me?" The chill intensified. Resentment took on physical form, lining every direction of the shadows beyond the gate, blood-red eyes staring fixedly at Hikaru and the three people behind him. Aster felt a wave of cold. Even he, standing outside the gate, felt a stab of pain, and involuntarily cradled his right hand with his left. Incredible. He marveled silently. As expected of Chief Hikaru. He was just standing outside the gate and already felt pain. So how was Hikaru, standing face to face with countless grudges, countless spirit phantoms, able to remain so rock-steady before that sea of spirits, enduring that horrifying agony? Amon and Echo likewise felt the pressure. And precisely because of that, they also realized just how extraordinary the young man standing inside the gate truly was. Boom! Boom! A sound like mountains toppling echoed through the darkness. Hikaru's smile widened. He looked up, excitement in his eyes. From the darkness, a colossal monster draped in a massive black cloak stepped before the gate. Beneath that pitch-black robe, only a pair of blood-red eyes peered out, watching Hikaru intently. Human. It opened its mouth. The stench of blood and decay wafted out, forcing Echo to instinctively step back. But that single half-step backward made her cry out, clutching her head in agony. Echo! What happened? Are you all right? Amon and Aster called out at once. She steadied herself after a moment and shook her head, indicating she was fine. But at the same time, she realized something: she had lost her qualification. Hikaru Amaji. Hikaru didn't look back. He calmly repeated his name. Hikaru? An interesting name. The enormous monster lightly tapped the ground with one hand. The earth shuddered as though a meteor had struck. Hikaru, do you dare say it again to my face? Heh, what's there to be afraid of? Hikaru thrust his fist toward those enormous red eyes glowing like stars in the sky above. I am Hikaru Amaji. Hikaru of Duel Academy. Hikaru who pursues fusion. Hikaru who seeks the ultimate, the absolute fusion. Whoever is willing to join me, whoever believes in me, whoever accepts me, no matter who you are welcome. And I promise, I will never forget you. Humph, words are cheap. The massive shadow exhaled again. This time, it was as though flames rose in the darkness. Unbelievable pain swept over everyone present who still had qualification. Aster and Amon couldn't help but grimace. And on Hikaru's body, real wounds began to appear. Hikaru casually wiped the blood from the cut on his face. His smile didn't waver. He nodded in understanding. Of course. If I just stand here talking big, that proves nothing. So? Hikaru raised his left hand. The dual disc on his wrist activated automatically, spinning rapidly, then flaring with an ever-shifting purple glow. Though he said nothing more, the implication was unmistakable. In this world, what could be more convincing than a duel? The enormous red eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed the colossal spirit was squinting. Interesting. Then, human warrior Hikari, you who claim to pursue fusion, prove yourself to all spirits through the rite of dueling. Duel, X2. Dark Spirit, LP, 4000. Hikaru Amaji, LP, 4000. Chapter 542. The duel began. The gate slowly swung open on its own, fully revealing the cityscape of the world of the forgotten to everyone present. Vast, dark, and strewn with bones, the world seemed like a beast waiting to devour whoever entered. Aster and Amon took positions not far behind Hikaru. By now, they'd introduced themselves to each other. The adopted heir of a financial dynasty and a star of the professional circuit. The two labels seemed to have nothing in common, but both Aster and Amon knew full well that arriving at the gate at nearly the same time meant there was likely no gap between them in power. This piqued Aster's interest slightly. Before coming here, Sartorius had told him he would begin the next stage of his journey to becoming stronger. He was curious about what exactly would make him stronger. While he did feel a slight attraction to Echo, Aster was through and through a proper gentleman. After brief contact with the two, he instantly snuffed out whatever faint notion had flickered in his mind. What he was more curious about was how this duel would unfold. The duel had started, but for some reason, the enormous spirit hadn't made a move, instead continuing to scrutinize Hikaru. And Hikaru himself was staring at the cards in his hand with surprise, as if something was unexpected. The spirit studied Hikaru and spoke slowly. It seems you feel neither anger nor disgust. Only puzzlement. I'm just a little surprised. Surprised? What was going on? Both duelists turned to look at Hikaru. When you entered this world, when you sank into this abyss, when you walked toward the gates of this netherworld under darkness and pressure, the monsters in your decks were being slowly replaced. That was possible. The two immediately checked their decks and found that their monsters had indeed been swapped out for normal monsters. How? Aster exclaimed. I didn't notice at all. Amon said in disbelief. Rest easy. Your monsters haven't truly been replaced. The spirits here have merely hidden them in your side decks. Both quickly reached for their belt pouches, found their monsters safe and sound, and breathed a sigh of relief. While they'd come here to seek out forgotten spirits, losing their own cards in the process was out of the question. If you wish to prove yourselves, to prove your resolve, then you must demonstrate it through action. Should you fail, I will bestow upon you the most agonizing curse. No matter who you duel, at the critical moment, you will never draw the card you need most. Whoa! Everyone stared at the spirit, faces full of shock. It could actually do that? This spirit's power was that immense? Can only these monsters be used in the duel? Echo looked at Amon's deck. Fight with these weak monsters that had no special abilities? She was worried. No, perhaps this is exactly how it should be. Amon studied the monsters in his hand. If I want to save these spirits, to make their resentment and suffering disappear, what I should do is stand in the same position as them. I understand. Amon reflected deeply. Oh, you want to save the spirits here? Make their pain and resentment vanish? Aster overheard Amon and couldn't help feeling intrigued. Interesting. If you could actually pull that off, that would be a truly heroic feat. Then he shook his head with a smile. Though it looks like an incredibly harsh trial, in reality, for Chief, it should have almost no impact, right? Almost no impact? The other two turned to Hikaru. Hikaru nodded. That's right. As long as I have fusion, nothing else matters. It seems the humans who've come to this world this time all carry conviction. Not a single fraud among you. The enormous spirit surveyed all the humans once more, then slowly raised its right hand in acknowledgement. Then, let's see if you have any real skill. My turn, draw. Normal summon, myself. It summoned itself right off the bat. Everyone was startled. They were all battle-hardened, having adventured and dueled across many dimensions. They knew full well that spirits often summon themselves during duels. On one hand, it was the card they knew best. On the other, summoning themselves amplified their dueling power, letting them draw and play stronger cards. But leading with a self-summon. Normal summon in attack position, Leo Wizard the Dark Fiend. A smaller, cloaked spirit leapt forward and landed on the field. Who? Everyone mentally shouted at the same time. Even Hikaru's jaw nearly dropped. What was the name? Leo Wizard. A god. Looking more closely, the cloaked, magic-wielding monster was indeed just a lion wearing a cloak. It really was Leo Wizard. Could even a god be forgotten? Then he caught himself. No, this wasn't his old world. The meme about this card didn't exist here. Leo Wizard the Dark Fiend, Level 4, Dark, Spellcaster, ATK 1350. Only 1350 ATK? Echo frowned in confusion. Leo Wizard, that's the one, right? The Level 4 Spellcaster monster? Aster's knowledge was extensive enough to instantly recognize the monster's origin. Leo Wizard? Amon was also somewhat surprised. A level 4 monster with only 1350 ATK, yet in this world, it had evolved? But the important point here probably isn't that. Aster thought for a moment, then spoke up. Right, exactly. Amon followed immediately. If all the monster cards in Hikaru's deck have been replaced with the monsters from this world, then they're all monsters with perfectly ordinary ATK and DEF, forgotten monsters. Breaking through 1350 ATK might be somewhat difficult. And moreover, attack position feels very much like bait. Thinking this, the two exchanged another glance. It seemed the opponent was indeed formidable. I'm not finished. Activate continuous spell, Heart of the Underdog. Leo Wizard played a continuous spell on the field. Heart of the Underdog. As if competing, Amon spoke first. It's a continuous spell that lets you reveal the card drawn during the draw phase if it's a normal monster, then draw one additional card. The powerful thing about this card is that as long as the card drawn during the draw phase is a normal monster, you get to draw again. Aster refused to be outdone. So if you activate a quick play spell during the draw phase to swap your hand and draw a normal monster, you can keep drawing. Both nodded simultaneously. It was a remarkably high-quality support card for normal monsters. Set 1 card. Turn end. The enormous lion slowly laid a card face down on the field, watching Hikaru. Everyone was curious how Hikaru would duel. Hikaru showed no tension whatsoever. He glanced at his hand and immediately began his turn. My turn, draw. Hikaru drew a card from his deck, glanced at it, then casually asked, so then, Leo Wizard, the monsters in your deck should be the same monsters as mine, right? Correct. Aside from myself, all the monsters are the same as yours. If your deck still contains any old, antiquated monsters without abilities, those may have been kept as well. Hikaru nodded. He tried to play a monster, but was surprised to find he couldn't use it. What's this? As long as I exist on the field, both players must tribute one monster to tribute summon any level 4 or lower monster whose ATK or def exceeds 1350. Holy! Hikaru's pupils contracted. What did it just say? Amon's eyes widened in shock. It's actually a rule-altering effect. Aster was equally stunned. This kind of effect probably couldn't even be replicated in current simulator duels. I see. That really is a powerful effect. Hikaru praised sincerely. The effect was actually quite formidable, because in his memory, modern monsters generally had higher ATK and DEF. Requiring a tribute at the 1350 threshold was genuinely oppressive. Though admittedly, most real core monsters could special summon themselves anyway. Then, I'll play this. Hikaru didn't hold back, placing a card directly on the field. Field spell, Fusion Recycling Plant. Oh, a field spell with fusion in the name? Leo Wizard surveyed the surroundings and, recalling Hikaru's earlier declaration, wasn't particularly surprised. After all, the man had said as much. But you realize, Leo Wizard raised a hand and said, among the countless abandoned spirits here, there are also fusion materials for ancient fusion monsters. But because those materials are so hard to assemble, the fusion monsters they produce can't even match some of the popular low-level monsters in your world today. They were tragically discarded for that reason. So, how will you prove your fusion? Hikaru looked at the monsters in his hand, nodded, and said, indeed, many monsters of the past were gradually abandoned because they couldn't keep up with new cards. But that's never permanent. When the right moment comes, even a card that once seemed completely useless can suddenly shine. A prime example might be Fabled Luri. An obscure card from the Fabled series that suddenly reappeared on players' radars with the arrival of Fiendsmith, even leaping to become a staple component in numerous decks. And it's not just that. Dueling evolves, and fusion naturally evolves with it. What I want to prove is this: no matter the circumstances, as long as you're willing to accept me, as long as you're willing to move forward with me, then fusion will always be possible. Activate spell card, Polymerization. He abandoned his normal summon entirely. Going straight into fusion. I fuse Thousand Eyes Idol and Key Spirit from my hand. How can those two monsters be fused? Leo Wizard was caught off guard. Ah, it's that monster. Aster immediately understood Hikaru's plan. That's right. Hikaru heard Aster's murmur. He raised his hand and declared, the fusion condition is, two normal monsters. Ancient Dragon, shelter your children and bring forth the power of fusion. Fusion Summon. Level 9. First of the Dragons. Roar. A winged, serpentine dragon appeared spinning out of the dark mist of fusion, supported by the power of two normal monsters. First of the Dragons, Level 9, Dark Dragon, ATK 2700. Interesting. Leo Wizard gazed at this dragon and silently nodded in approval. A fusion monster that only requires normal monsters as material? Amon nodded continuously from the sideline. That way, even antiquated monsters have the power to protect themselves. Exactly. On this point, Aster dropped any competitive mindset with Amon and spoke directly. Believe in fusion, have faith in fusion, fuse with one another. Through fusion's power, all beings can support each other. Even originally weak monsters can gain the strength to overcome powerful enemies. That is Chief's conviction. The forgotten spirits may be filled with pain. They may be unable to forgive the suffering of being abandoned. But as long as they're willing to follow Chief, he will offer his own conviction for them to fuse with. A truly heroic act. Aster's opinion of Hikaru had always been this high. Amon, meanwhile, gained an even more comprehensive understanding of Hikaru's strength. Battle. First of the dragons attacks you, Lord Leo Wizard. Activate continuous trap, DNA transplant. HM? Hikaru paused. When this card is activated, declare one attribute. While this card is on the field, all face-up monsters on the field become the declared attribute. I declare, light. The originally dark, wizard-robed lion suddenly radiated holy light, while the majestic first of the dragons seemed to take on a benevolent appearance. Leo Wizard the Dark Fiend, dark-light. First of the dragons, dark-light. But that shouldn't change the outcome, right? First of the dragons still has higher ATK. Echo whispered. No, if it played a trap like that, there must be a purpose. Amon said. It's probably its own effect. Amon nodded. Heh, correct. It gestured for its smaller self to raise its claws. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles a light monster, I can destroy that monster. With that, the small lion raised its right claw and hurled a pitch-black energy sphere straight at first of the dragons. Direct destruction of light monsters. That was indeed impressive. Both duelists marveled again. Ha! But, Lord Leo Wizard. Hikaru showed not a shred of hesitation. My fusion is no empty boast. As long as first of the dragons exists in the monster zone, it cannot be destroyed by battle with anything other than a normal monster, and is unaffected by monster effects other than its own. The images of two normal monsters surfaced on first of the dragon's body. Together, they blocked the burst of energy from Leo Wizard, shielding the dragon from the effect. And so, first of the dragons lunged forward, smashing into Leo Wizard and shattering it. The gale blew the main body of Leo Wizard's cloak askew, revealing the massive lion face hidden beneath, several meters tall. Leo Wizard the Dark Fiend, LP, 4000-2650. Ha ha ha. Leo Wizard let out a deep laugh. Using forgotten monsters to perform fusion, and even using their power to protect the fusion. An interesting human. It seems you truly aren't just spouting nonsense. It raised its hand, explaining its effect as it went. When I'm destroyed by battle or card effect, I can add one monster with 1350 ATK from my deck to my hand. It can search itself. Even Echo could see how strong that was. However, Leo Wizard didn't search for Leo Wizard the Dark Fiend. Instead, it took the normal monster version of itself. The standard Leo Wizard. The meaning was clear. At least for this opening stage of the duel, it considered Hikaru to have passed. That is, the ability to properly utilize the cards of this world. But obviously, there was still a more fundamental question. And that was whether Hikaru would abandon them. Whether he could truly continue to fuse, as he always had. Chapter 543, Fusion and Sublimation. The battle phase ends. I activate the effect of my field spell, Fusion Recycling Plant. I discard one card from my hand, then add the spell card Fusion Substitute from my deck to my hand. I activate the effect of the discarded Metalfoes Fusion. This card returns to the deck, I shuffle, then draw one card. Hikaru glanced at the card he drew, set a card on the field, and said, I set one card. Turn end. At this moment, the effect of Fusion Recycling Plant activates. During each player's end phase, I can target one fusion material monster in my graveyard that was used for a fusion summon this turn. That monster is returned to my hand. I return Thousand Eyes Idol from my graveyard to my hand, as it was used as fusion material. My turn. Draw. Leo Wizard drew a card from his deck, then revealed it immediately. Normal monster, Bone Mouse. By the effect of Heart of the Underdog, I draw one card. He raised his hand, and another card flew from his deck. He flipped it over, displaying it for everyone. Normal monster, Shadow Spectre. By the effect of continuous spell Heart of the Underdog, I draw one card. He spoke these words calmly, then drew from his deck once more in silence. Because his deck was packed with normal monsters, Heart of the Underdog let him draw card after card. Even so, after drawing several monsters, he stopped. He had drawn a spell card. Triangle Power, Spell card, Triangle Power. Hikaru's eyes narrowed. Triangle Power could only be activated when 3 normal monsters with the same name existed on his field. The turn it was activated, all 3 could attack directly. He ran the math in his head. Leo Wizard's ATK was only 1350, but 3 of them totaled 4050. If all 3 attacked directly, there was no question he would lose. The other 2 duelists watching also recognized this the moment they saw Triangle Power. For once, they held their tongues, not commenting on the card's effect or discussing Leo Wizard's tactics. Because they knew full well that this was not the time to disrupt the duelists' focus. If Hikaru made a wrong move because of their interference, that would be on them. I activate the spell card Ancient Rules. Leo Wizard scanned his hand, then played a card. This card lets me special summon a level 5 or higher normal monster from my hand. I special summon myself. Leo Wizard. An identical cloaked lion materialized on his field. Leo Wizard, level 5, Earth, Spellcaster, ATK 1350. At this moment, I activate the quick play spell Inferno Reckless Summon. When a monster with 1500 or less ATK is special summoned to my field in attack position while my opponent controls a face-up monster, I can activate this card. Both players special summon, from their hand, deck, and graveyard, as many copies of their respective monster as possible in attack position. My opponent selects one face-up monster they control and does the same. Just as expected. Hikaru understood Leo Wizard's plan immediately. He intended to use Triangle Power for a direct attack kill. In that case, I activate the trap card Flame Sword Dance. Hikaru reacted without hesitation. When a monster is special summoned, I can activate this card. I special summon one level 7 or lower Flame Swordsman, or a fusion monster whose name is listed in its text, from the extra deck. After that, I can change one face-up monster on the field to face-down defense position. Woohoo! Master, here I come. Flame Swordsman burst onto the field, greatsword in hand, ready to take in the atmosphere. But the pain saturating the air immediately stole his breath. Flame Swordsman, is it? Leo Wizard regarded the fiery warrior with a hint of surprise. Flame Swordsman, level 5, Fire, Warrior, Def 1600. Flame Swordsman. Aster folded his arms, a smile tugging at his lips. One of the legendary duelist Joey Wheeler's signature cards. It carved a path through countless duels for him in the old days. But as the era of legends ended, Flame Swordsman gradually became a relic. Still rare, still expensive, yet slowly forgotten. The reason was simple. The versions of Flame Swordsman released after that were all fusion monsters, Amon continued. I've heard that Joey Wheeler's original Flame Swordsman was an effect monster that didn't require fusion. But every version that Industrial Illusions and Kaiba released afterward was a fusion monster. The evolution path was locked in, so to speak. Extremely rare and famous, yes, but with low ATK and peculiar fusion materials, it hasn't appeared on the competitive stage in a long time. That's right. For most people, Flame Swordsman was the forgotten card. Until Hikaru brought Flame Swordsman back into the spotlight. He made it famous again through fusion. Flame Swordsman listened to the two talking, and before he knew it, his chest swelled with pride. He puffed himself up, tapping his breastplate, confidence radiating from every inch. That's right. He was Flame Swordsman. And as if responding to his arrival, the resentment and pain swirling through the area began to dissipate. The oppressive force retreated from Hikaru's vicinity, circling at a distance instead. I use Flame Sword Dance's effect to flip you face down. The little Leo wizard pulled his cloak around himself, curled up, and fell asleep, becoming a face-down card. Since you no longer have a face-up monster, you cannot special summon copies of the same name. Likewise, because my monster is a fusion monster, Inferno Reckless Summon cannot special summon from the extra deck, so I can't summon any either. His strategy had been disrupted, but Leo Wizard showed no surprise. It was not strange for an opponent to see through his tactics. If one plan didn't work, there were always other methods. I activate the spell card destruction. Both players discard their entire hand, then draw the same number of cards. Hikaru raised an eyebrow. He sent all his cards to the graveyard, then drew 3 from his deck. On the other side, Leo Wizard discarded a large hand, then refreshed it. I activate the spell card Enchanting Fitting Room. He placed the spell card on the field. Enchanting Fitting Room is another card that supports low-level normal monsters, Amon said with a frown. Because his deck is filled with low-level normal monsters, he runs cards like this to get the best results possible. Leo Wizard, LP, 2650-1850. I pay 800 life points. I reveal the top 4 cards of my deck. I special summon all level 3 or lower normal monsters among them, and return the rest to the deck. First card, level 1, Mechanical Bat. Leo Wizard flipped a card. Everyone leaned in, curious how many he would hit. Second card. The next card on his deck turned over slowly, revealing itself. Level 2, Dig Beak. The third card began flipping at the same time. Seeing it, Echo let out a gasp. Third card. Level 2, Basic Insect. As if anticipating something, as if marveling, everyone stared at the final card atop Leo Wizard's deck. Fourth card. The card turned over. Level 1, Goblin Calligrapher. All 4. Every single one. Even though they had a sense it might happen, seeing Leo Wizard flip 4 cards and hit 4 level 3 or lower normal monsters still shocked the onlookers into exclaiming. This was clearly not normal. I tribute myself on the field to tribute summon Morinfen. Oh man. The Sky God himself. Hikaru quipped silently to himself. Next, I activate the spell card Sword of the Soul Eater. This card can only be equipped to a level 3 or lower normal monster on my field. When this card is activated, I tribute all normal monsters on my field except the equipped monster. For each one tribute, the equipped monster gains 1000 ATK. I equip this card to Basic Insect and tribute every other monster on the field, raising its ATK by 400. A great sword materialized before the diminutive green insect. Basic Insect hefted the blade. Though it pulsed with dark energy and looked wicked beyond measure, the 4 normal monsters willingly rushed toward the cursed sword one after another to grant it their power, so that it could defeat their enemy. Basic Insect, Level 2, Earth, Insect, ATK 500 4500. 4500 ATK. Echo covered her mouth. That's on par with Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon. Even Aster felt a twinge of pressure. His Destiny heroes generally had low ATK. If he were forced to duel with a deck full of unfamiliar monsters, he would have an even harder time against this creature. Battle. Basic Insect. With the cursed blade, with all of your resentment, strike down the enemy. Basic Insect leaped at the dragon with its sword. Though the dragon possessed the power of its allies, that power had its limits. How could it compare to the strength of 4 monsters who sacrificed themselves willingly? Destroy those new, fancy monsters that took your place. Leo Wizard roared. The blade cut through the dragon. A massive wave of dark energy erupted, spilling past the dragon and crashing into Hikaru. Flame Swordsman sprang to his feet, shielding his master. Flames surged upward. That was Flame Swordsman. Always standing between Hikaru and danger. Don't protect me, Flame Sword! Hikaru shouted. Let me take this hit. Let me see for myself what kind of pain these spirits have endured. Very well, Master. He stepped aside, letting Hikaru face the darkness and resentment head-on. It was an old card. A butterfly net, a child catching insects without a care on a summer evening. His parents, celebrating his birthday, gave him a card from the popular new Duel Monsters game. The card was novel and fascinating, made of a strange material, and because it was an insect, his favorite thing in the world, he treasured it. But then, as Duelist Kingdom, Battle City, and countless tournaments came and went, the months and years passed. The child grew up, started school, developed new interests, and grew increasingly conscious of numbers. Basic Insect, that old, powerless, feeble card, gradually slipped from the student's mind. It became just another piece of paper at the bottom of a box, until one day, while cleaning his room, the student tossed it out without a second thought. Without even looking for it. After enduring layer upon layer of pain and sorrow, the card fell into the abyss. Pure resentment and agony consumed it, and it was forgotten completely. Hikaru LP, 4,000-2,200. Hikaru shook his head. So that was what happened. He looked at Basic Insect, then at his own graveyard and his opponents. Every card here had likely experienced something similar. Forgotten, abandoned, thrown away. The pain of those experiences haunts you. It won't let go. But I'm here now. Purple light flickered in Hikaru's eyes. Destruction, devastation, shattering, rebirth. That's right. Fusion. Hikaru took a deep breath. Fusion is the process of alchemy. For me, and for all of you, being forgotten is nothing more than a stage in that process. Someday, you will never be forgotten again. That's what I want to say. He shouted those words, as if willing his conviction to reach beyond himself. In the darkness, wisps of black mist rippled at the sound. Their color seemed to lighten, ever so faintly. Turning purple. Not far behind Hikaru, Aster's eyes went wide. His voice had reached them. Interesting. Leo Wizard murmured in surprise. Well then. I set one card. Turn end. My turn. Hikaru drew a card from his deck in one sharp motion, then glanced at it. His eyes narrowed. I activate the continuous spell piercing the darkness. What card was that? Amon didn't recognize it. He was intrigued. The card art appeared to depict Dark Magician the Night Swordsman. This card is a support card dedicated to normal monsters, Hikaru said without hesitation. As long as this card is on the field, once per turn, when I successfully normal or special summon a normal monster, I can draw one card from my deck. However, I'm not going to activate that effect right now. I activate the effect of my Field Spell Fusion Recycling Plant, discarding one card from my hand to add a polymerization from my deck or graveyard to my hand. I add polymerization from my deck to my hand, then activate the spell card polymerization. Hikaru held up polymerization as he spoke. The fusion conditions are two warrior-type monsters with different attributes. I fuse Flame Swordsman on my field, who is fire, with Elemental Hero Clayman in my hand. Clayman was indeed a hero, but its presence was admittedly low. Perhaps that was precisely why it hadn't been squeezed out of Hikaru's deck and into his side deck. Let's go, Flame Sword. Yes, Master. Flame Swordsman and Clayman began to fuse. Gradually, a new monster emerged from the swirling vortex. Fusion Summon. Guilty Gearfried the Magical Steel Knight. Clank, clang. A proud knight, gleaming with radiance, emerged. Guilty Gearfried the Magical Steel Knight. Level 8, Light, Warrior, ATK 2700. Oh. Another monster that doesn't require specific materials, just any two warriors? Amon couldn't help but applaud. In other words, even the most ancient warrior monster can be fused into this? More and more purple energy swirled through the air. But my ATK is still higher, Leo Wizard noted. No. Hikaru slowly clenched his fist. Piercing the darkness, effect. When a monster that was fusion summoned using a normal monster as material declares an attack against an opponent's monster, I can activate this. That monster's ATK increases by the opposing monster's ATK until the end of the turn. Its ATK was only 2700, but the moment it attacked, it would instantly become 7200. Even higher than that. Aster remarked from the sidelines. During damage calculation, when Guilty Gear Fright battles an opponent's monster, he can banish a spell card from the graveyard to increase his ATK by half his def until the end of the turn. That's 8000 ATK. 8000 ATK. Echo gasped. That kind of ATK power. Forget Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon. Even Five-Headed Dragon couldn't compare. Battle. With Guilty Gear Fright, the Magical Steel Knight. Open trap card. Seeing Hikaru's attack, Leo Wizard flipped his set card without hesitation. Counter trap, negate attack. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, I target that one attacking monster and activate this. That attack is negated. After that, the battle phase ends. Hikaru frowned. A sudden gust of wind materialized before the leaping knight, forcing him back. Though Guilty Gear Fright possessed the ability to negate effects that targeted him, unfortunately, a monster had no way to resist a counter trap. Hikaru scanned his hand. I activate the effective fusion substitute in my graveyard, banishing it, then returning one fusion monster to the extra deck and drawing one card. A card popped from his deck. This one? It had been a while since he'd used it. Hikaru considered for a moment. I set one card. Turn end. Then, by fusion recycling plants effect, I recover Clayman from my graveyard. What a shame. If that attack had gone through, Hikaru would have won, Echo said. No, it's fine, Amon replied. As long as Piercing the Darkness remains on the field, Hikaru's Guilty Gear Fright is invincible against basic insect. It's far from easy to defeat. Aster nodded as well. Under these circumstances, Hikaru was virtually guaranteed not to lose. Of course. The key word was virtually. Because Leo Wizard still had Heart of the Underdog on his field. With that in play, anything could happen. My turn, draw. Leo Wizard drew quickly, then showed the card to everyone. Normal monster, Ancient Jar. He kept drawing without pause. Normal monster, Fungi of the Musk. Normal monster, Gigabyte. Normal monster, Dancing Elf. A trap card. In that case, at this moment, I activate the quick play spell Hand Destruction. Both players send 2 cards from their hand to the graveyard, then draw 2 cards. Hikaru sent his cards to the graveyard. Leo Wizard quickly drew his replacements, then revealed, Normal Monster. Draw 1 card. Once more. Hand Destruction. He drew several more cards in succession, then gave a slight nod. That should be enough. I activate the spell card Try White. He played the spell card. I target 3 level 2 or lower normal monsters in my graveyard and special summon them. Special summon, level 1 Mechanical Bat. Level 1 Dancing Elf. Level 1 Bone Mouse. And finally, normal summon, level 1 Gigabyte. Leo Wizard summoned a row of small, weak, ancient, forgotten monsters, eroded by pain, shambling like the Walking Dead. I am the Forgotten One. I am the Guardian. I am the ancient wizard who stumbled upon this dimension during a whimsical journey across worlds. I stand guard here, sheltering these lost and confused spirits, consumed by resentment, reduced to nothing but bone and shambling husks. Leo Wizard finally offered a proper introduction. From the sound of it, he had come to this world of his own free will to protect the forgotten spirits. If even I were to leave, if even I stopped caring, who else would protect my weak and wretched kindred? This was the world of the forgotten. Without him caring for these spirits, beings that retained only base instincts and a desire to inflict their suffering on others, this place would have long since become a true pit of darkness. At the same time, precisely because the world was filled with these resentment-driven, hollow spirits, the dimension's hostility toward ordinary visitors had grown worse and worse. What Hikaru needed to face was never Leo Wizard himself. Leo Wizard welcomed anyone who could take these spirits away. What Hikaru and the others needed to face was the dimension itself. The future of this world of the forgotten. Human. Let me see your true will. Let me see just how powerful your fusion truly is. I activate the spell card Triangle Power. All face-up level 1 normal monsters on my field gain 2000 ATK and DF. At the end phase, all level 1 monsters on my field are destroyed. Mechanical Bat, ATK 300-2300, Dancing Elf, ATK 300-2300, Bone Mouse, ATK 400-2400, Gigabyte, ATK 350-2350. But what's the point? Echo asked, confused. Even with a 2000 ATK boost, they can't match Guilty Gearfried, can they? She finished speaking, but noticed neither of the two men had responded. She turned to look and found both of them grim-faced, cold sweat beading on their foreheads. They had realized something. At this moment, I control 5 face-up level 2 or lower normal monsters. Therefore, I can activate this card. Spell card, the Law of the Normal. A card plummeted from the sky like a spike, embedding itself into the earth. By its effect, both duelists discard their entire hands, then all cards on the field except level 2 or lower normal monsters are destroyed. Echo felt as though a hand had seized her throat. She couldn't breathe. Hands, field, everything destroyed. For level 1 monsters with over 2000 ATK each? Forget 4000 LP. Even 8000 wouldn't survive that. Go! Pour out your pain, your resentment. 5 misshapen monsters, dripping with acid and exposing bone, howled in unison. The field shattered with a crack. Heart of the underdog vanished in an instant. Hikaru's set card was ripped open and destroyed. He watched the cards in his hand crumble before his eyes. And Guilty Gearfried, the magical Steel Knight, despite his gleaming steel armor, could not withstand the tempest. Darkness and torment dragged him into the grave. Hikaru's field was completely empty. It seems this is the end, human. The onlookers sighed with regret. Who could have predicted that Leo Wizard's final tactic would be the total annihilation of all cards? No. Hikaru spoke calmly. I said no. Why? Every being present asked instinctively. It's true that the Law of the Normal destroyed all my cards. But it also destroyed your Sword of the Soul Eater. That means Basic Insect's ATK has dropped back to 500. What difference does that make? You have no monsters on your field. No. You're wrong. I am Hikaru Amagi. Hikaru Amagi of Duel Academy. Hikaru of Fusion. The one who pursues the pinnacle of fusion. So even if everything is destroyed, even if everything is abandoned, even if everything vanishes, I will come back. I will not give up. I activate the effect of a trap card in my graveyard. What? Waking the Dragon. When this set card leaves the field by an opponent's effect and is sent to the graveyard or banished, I can activate this effect. I special summon one monster from my deck or extra deck. The monster I special summon is Magnum the Reliever. Magnum the Reliever. Level 8, Light, Fiend, ATK 2800. 2800 ATK. They can't get past it. Beautiful. That's the director for you. He's won. Aster cheered from behind. He didn't recognize the monster, but 2800 ATK spelled victory for Hikaru. Both players had discarded all their cards, and Leo Wizard's monsters would be destroyed at the end phase by Triangle Power. That would leave only Basic Insect with its 700 DEF. As long as Hikaru drew any monster with more than 800 ATK, he would win. And if Magnum had any useful effects, it would be even easier. Impressive. Worthy of someone recommended by that old man. Leo Wizard studied Hikaru. But, human, no, Hikaru. Up until now, you have been using fusion. But even without normal monsters, even without these abandoned cards, it would make no difference to you, would it? Because all you need is a fusion spell card. My fusion is not that narrow. Then prove it to me. Leo Wizard said in a low voice. Prove it to me. No, prove it to this world. Prove that they, too, can be part of fusion. I switch basic insect to defense position. Turn end. Crash, crash, crash. The zombies and skeletons formed from resentment on his field shattered and dissipated into the world. Prove it to everything, huh? Very well. Then let you, and this world, witness my fusion. My turn, draw. Hikaru glanced at the card he drew, then spoke. Magnum the Reliever's Effect. I target one fusion or polymerization spell card in my graveyard. That card returns to the bottom of the deck. After that, I draw one card. I recover Fusion Recycling Plant. He drew again. And this time, the card he drew. He didn't look at it. He held the second card high above his head. Fusion is the process of resublimation. Just like Magnum, it recycles fusion cards that have already been used and sent to the graveyard. And from that, new possibilities emerge. This is my new understanding of fusion. Now, spirits, come to me. Purple light began to gather. The bones, flesh, and crystallized fragments of the monsters that had shattered on Leo Wizard's field began to spiral through the air, flying toward Hikaru's hand. Rumble, rumble. The great stone gate began to resonate. Purple gemstones materialized across the gate's surface. At the same time, color began slowly bleeding back into the entire world of the forgotten. Being forgotten is just a stage in the process. Be reborn in a new form. Come forth. Crack, crack. Aster and the others thought they heard the sound of bones breaking apart. Hikaru slowly brought the card before his eyes, gazing at the purple light radiating from it. Here it comes. Normal summon. Level 1, Mementotlin Mace. A goat-skulled figure appeared on the field. Then, countless wisps of purple smoke converged together, and a being identical in appearance to the original Memento spirit, yet dressed in an entirely different manner, descended. It was not a single entity. It was the aggregate of countless spirits across this dimension who had felt Hikaru's spirit and conviction, crystallized through the power of fusion. Mementotlin Mace. The Memento spirit evolved? The three onlookers stood in stunned silence. Echo especially. Hikaru's actions were shattering her understanding of the world. It was her first time learning that a duelist's willpower, spiritual force, and connection to spirits could, when strong enough, directly create an entirely new card during a duel. Fascinating. Fascinating, Hikaru. At some point, a crown had appeared atop Leo Wizard's head. This world, it seemed, had been infused with entirely new possibilities by Hikaru's arrival and his fusion. And those possibilities were guiding it toward a far more distant future. Guiding this spirit dimension to choose a new direction of evolution. Of all the countless humans he had encountered, this Hikaru was surely the most pure. Mementotlin Mace's effect activates. Hikaru swept his right hand forward. During my main phase, I can activate this. I destroy one memento monster I control, then add one memento card other than Mementotlin Mace from my deck to my hand. Hikaru picked up his deck, slowly flipped it over, and spread it out like a hand of playing cards for all to see, revealing card after card of green borders. Then he plucked one from the center. The card I choose is the Quick Play spell. Mementotlin Fusion. Memento. Fusion. A brand new fusion. A fusion belonging to the forgotten. Leo Wizard's eyes glistened with what might have been tears. Destruction is forgetting. But forgetting does not last forever. After destruction comes rebirth. That is the sublimation of fusion. Quick Play spell, Mementotlin Fusion. Activated during either player's main phase. I fusion summon one fusion monster, using monsters from my hand or field that include a memento monster as fusion material. If a monster I control was destroyed by an effect this turn, I can also return memento monsters from my graveyard to the deck as fusion material. Return to the deck for fusion? Echo was stunned once again. Truly remarkable. Even Amon had to admit that Hikaru was creating something beyond his comprehension. Fusion by returning cards to the deck. I've never seen anything like it. Meanwhile, Aster was thinking something else entirely. Monsters are destroyed and forgotten, but through fusion, the forgotten monsters are recovered. A heroic feat if I've ever seen one. Perhaps this is what destiny wanted me to witness? I fuse Elemental Hero Avian from my hand with Mementatlan Mace from my graveyard. Fusion Summon. Level 8, Elemental Hero the Shining. Mementatlan Mace's light illuminated the entire world. Mountains of bones, forgotten and abandoned in this world, began to stir with life once more. They stacked upon one another, guiding this world's evolution toward a new direction. Elemental Hero the Shining, Level 8, Light, Warrior, ATK 2600. Battle. Magnum the Reliever, destroyed basic insect in battle. Then, the Shining, direct attack on Leo Wizard. The Shining did not charge at Leo Wizard. It simply stood atop the Great Gate, radiating its light, illuminating the entire underworld brighter than ever before. Leo Wizard, LP, 1850. Ha! Ha ha ha! Despite his defeat, his laughter shook the heavens. Chapter 544, Destiny is guiding me forward. Clap, clap, clap. As the duel ended, Aster and the other two couldn't help but applaud Hikaru. There was no audience here. Hikaru had no need to perform for anyone. To duel in a place like this relying on pure fusion, and then earn the recognition of an entire dimension's spirit will, creating an entirely new monster in the process, that kind of achievement spoke for itself. Among the three spectators, Aster had the most measured reaction. After all, though he had never witnessed this particular scene before, he had personally seen something even more extreme. Compared to the flames that accompanied the birth of Destiny Hero. Destroy Phoenix Enforcer, this world of the forgotten was actually tame. Because throughout Hikaru's duel, the entire world had been responding to and supporting him. When Hikaru had dueled against the light of destruction, he had been fighting against the very rules of the universe. With the duel concluded, the Great Lion lowered himself slightly and extended a claw, gently clasping Hikaru's hand with a fingerdip and a handshake, then began to thank him. He could feel it. This world, this dimension, was evolving into something entirely new because of this duel. Perhaps one day, the entire dimension would be completely transformed. When that time comes, this world probably won't be called the world of the forgotten anymore. As he spoke, something instinctive stirred within him. In my heart, this world seems to be answering me, telling me of its future possibilities. Memento. I understand now. This world will become a true world of spirits. And its name will be Memento Mictlan. He would become this dimension's first and truest guardian. As his words fell, the skull decorations on the Great Gates slowly rearranged themselves into a massive emblem that looked remarkably like his crown. Black smoke, misfortune, pain, torment, countless energies surged into the surroundings, forming piles of white bone. But this time, those bones carried no suffering or agony. Instead, they seemed to be nurturing new life. That's right. Leo Wizard realized it in his heart. This world, like other spirit worlds, would slowly begin to give birth to spirits of its own. He swept his robe. The spirits who had recently fallen into this dimension, who hadn't yet endured too much torment and hadn't been assimilated, found themselves draped in robes of bone. They felt strength returning to their bodies, and laughter, of all things, rang out in this dimension for the first time. If they are forgotten, then I will remember them. And then I will raise them. Leo Wizard made his final resolution. Though Leo Wizard was no god, at that moment, in Hikaru's eyes, he was a true god of mercy. Leo Wizard thanked Hikaru once more. Without a moment's hesitation, he handed over his own essence, Leo Wizard the Dark Fiend. Though Hikaru was unlikely to ever use the card, he accepted the gift with solemnity. As long as you hold this card, as long as I still exist in this dimension, you may return to this forgotten world at any time. Thank you, Lord Leo Wizard. Hikaru nodded gently. Though Hikaru had drawn on his knowledge of the Memento archetype to predict this world's evolutionary path into the Memento Mictlan dimension, and had leveraged that knowledge to create new cards during the duel, it was ultimately a shortcut. For the time being, the only copy of Mementatlan Mace in this world was the one in his hand. After all, it had been created by the collective consciousness of every spirit in this dimension. Hikaru put the card away, then opened his deck and gave it a quick look. Sure enough. Though this world had altered his deck, there were clearly limits to the changes. Hikaru's personal spiritual power couldn't resist the full force of this world of the forgotten, so some cards had been replaced. But at the same time, if this world tried to completely overwrite his entire deck or match the sheer magnitude of superpolymerization, it would fall short. Fortunately, not many cards had changed. Just 2 copies of Mementatlan Fusion had been added out of nowhere. Hikaru put his cards away and greeted the other 3. He had watched the 2 men arrive at the gate, so he'd had time to think about what would come next. Amon and Aster. 2 very distinctive individuals. In the original Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Amon was a very peculiar character. What made him unique was that he was one of the few people who had absolutely no connection to Jaden, had never even dueled Jaden, yet had defeated both the second male leads of the show, one after the other. His duel against Chaz wasn't particularly noteworthy. In the original series, Chaz had always been too arrogant and overconfident before truly suffering, so Amon had defeated him with ease. But Amon's duel against Aster revealed just how absurdly powerful the truly elite duelists of this world really were. Amon had needed to perform a ritual to obtain Exodia, and Aster, having fallen for Echo at first sight, had wanted to protect her. The duel's starting point was a bit strange, but its content was even stranger. Despite having just added Exodia to his deck, Amon had maximized his draw power and forcibly assembled 4 of the 5 pieces within just a few turns. And Aster, who had never faced this type of duelist before, had spontaneously played a card called Power of 4, limiting both players' hands to 4 cards maximum and cutting off Amon's path to assembling all 5 pieces of Exodia. Later, Amon had used Exodia's ritual to gather the pieces in the graveyard through battle, aiming for victory that way. And in that sudden situation, Aster had once again played the exact right card, a trap that skipped the battle phase entirely. This showed that in the original series, duels between elite duelists weren't purely about dueling. They were clashes of a deeper power. Otherwise, Aster couldn't have drawn precisely the right counter at precisely the right moment. Naturally, this was also what sealed Aster's defeat. Echo and Amon were genuinely in love. So at the duel's climax, Echo had willingly sacrificed herself as a tribute for Exodia, tipping the balance of power and sealing Aster's loss for good. But Aster was, without question, a true destined hero. Even knowing he was fated to lose, even watching his duel disc's life points drain away, he felt no regret or resentment. If a hero's destiny was to sacrifice himself to protect others, he would walk to his death with open arms. After Exodia was unleashed, he had stood before Jaden and the others, arms spread wide, using his own body as a shield so his friends and teacher could escape with their lives. And now fate had brought these 2 together again in this dimension. Hikaru thought it over. He hadn't seen the sealed dark magician during his duel with Leo Wizard, but old Solomon Muda would never have lied to him. So this world definitely contained that sealed sorcerer somewhere. Still, his own trial was complete. He wouldn't interfere with whatever meeting lay ahead between the 2. Though he had noticed Aster developing feelings for Echo again, that wasn't something he needed to worry about. Aster was a genuine gentleman. Once he confirmed the couple was together, he would never overstep. After Hikaru's duel, logically one of either Aster or Amon should undergo the trial next, but since both had arrived at essentially the same time, they would need to settle who went first. But Aster had no interest in that sort of thing. Besides, after watching Hikaru's duel with Leo Wizard, he felt this world didn't need him. He had already seen something fascinating enough. He didn't need a trial, and he wouldn't take any of the spirits being nurtured here. Amon, after Aster stepped aside, chose to face Leo Wizard directly. Human, after watching Hikaru's duel, you still want to undergo a trial with me? Leo Wizard didn't mind. He was far stronger now than before. Though he had previously wielded this dimension's forgotten spirits as effortlessly as his own power, he had been forcing the use of cards that weren't truly his. But now, having received this world's acknowledgement, his dueling would be even stronger than when he faced Hikaru. Still, a trial didn't necessarily require a winner and a loser. Even if Hikaru had lost, given the content and spirit of his duel, Leo Wizard would never have truly cursed him. Then, speak your mind. Amon nodded. He spoke about what he had seen at the Nexus, and about some of the tragedies in the human world. His purpose in coming to this dimension was to change its current state and save some of the forgotten cards. However, since Hikaru had already accomplished all of that, he simply wanted to ask, with genuine admiration, if there was anything he could help with. After all, he was already here. If his dueling energy could contribute to this dimension in any way, he didn't mind going all out against Leo Wizard. Hearing his aspirations and sensing no malice, Leo Wizard gave a slight nod. Perhaps because Hikaru's performance had been so outstanding, Leo Wizard's attitude toward human intruders had softened considerably. Rather than dismissing Amon's ideas as fantasy, he told Amon that if he could stay and help the spirits here care for those still slumbering beneath the bones, he would consider observing Amon's resolve. Different people warranted different approaches. Hikaru's convictions could be read through dueling alone. But Amon's ideals required witnessing his actions firsthand. Rushing straight into a duel wouldn't suffice. Creating a world of peace and equality? Aster stood beside Hikaru, listening to Amon's words with a measure of respect. If someone truly had that kind of ambition, it was worthy of admiration. He had already been quietly comparing Amon's dueling skill and energy to his own, and he hadn't expected Amon to possess such a grand vision on top of it. He should be the representative from the Eastern Academy branch, Hikaru said from the side. In about 2 weeks, when the semester starts, representatives from every Duel Academy branch worldwide will come to the main campus. Aster, you'll have plenty of chances to spar with him then. Aster nodded, but then shook his head. I appreciate it, but I still have a lot of World Tour matches and other commitments, so I probably can't attend classes normally. Hikaru didn't mind. Aster was a busy person. That was nothing new. Just then, just when everyone seemed satisfied, Echo suddenly spoke up. Lord Leo Wizard. I did some research beforehand. This dimension contains Exodia, doesn't it? The moment those words left her mouth, everyone present stared at her in shock. How could she ask something like that at a time like this? Exodia. Leo Wizard's voice dropped low. The warm smile on his lion face gradually faded. I don't know where you came from, but you are correct. Indeed, this world does contain Exodia. The discarded Exodia. Just as she thought. Echo broke into a delighted smile. Aster couldn't help but frown. The favorable first impression he'd had of Echo vanished in an instant. Exodia? How could something like that possibly be forgotten? Unless he thought of a certain legend. Over a decade ago, when Duel Monsters was just gaining popularity, Maximilian Pegasus, president of Industrial Illusions, had held the Duelist Kingdom tournament. Before that tournament, the king of duelists, Yugi Muto, had the invincible Exodia in his deck. To stop and defeat that unbeatable set of cards, Weevil Underwood had tricked the young, trusting Duel King and thrown the cards into the sea. The discarded Exodia. Could cards like that still exist in this dimension? Those are the most powerful cards. Truly invincible cards. Echo took 2 deep breaths and addressed Leo Wizard, though her eyes were mostly on Amon. If we could obtain that ultimate power, then no matter what tragedy we face, we can overcome it. No matter what duel, we can win. With cards like those, we could become the strongest duelists in the world overnight, and we could build an ideal world. Naive. Leo Wizard roared. His fur stood on end, his crown flashed with a cold, sinister light, and the entire dimension seemed to pulse with purple radiance. That is the discarded Exodia. A wraith of Exodia, drenched in resentment. He glared straight at Echo, his body emanating a bone-chilling aura. Black gales whipped around them, forcing Amon to step in front of her. Though it was not its master who abandoned it, that Exodia carries the oldest hatred, jealousy, and abandonment of any card in this world. It is the true source of all resentment in this world of the forgotten. Leo Wizard roared. If Solomon Muto hadn't come to this world and taken Exodia's soul with him, the resentment here would have been far, far worse. Now, Exodia's soul had been removed. But the resentment and suffering it had accumulated in this world were as deep as mountains, as vast as hell. That was not Exodia. It was a terrifying evil spirit inhabiting Exodia's body. A spirit brimming with malice toward humanity. To use such a card, you must sacrifice the person you love most and sever all emotion. Lord Leo Wizard. Hikaru suddenly cut in. Hikaru, are you going to defend them? What I mean is, my friend was just asking out of curiosity. You don't need to explain any further about how it all works. Hikaru coughed twice. Leo Wizard caught himself and took 2 deep breaths. Indeed. In his anger, he had revealed things he shouldn't have. As expected of Hikaru. He shouldn't have lost his composure like that. He shook his mane, then lowered his gaze to the group. Noticing Echo's contemplative expression, he growled menacingly, "Do not ask any more questions about this. It's for your own good. If you still wish to rescue some of the spirits in this world, then go explore. Otherwise, leave. Humans." Though he said feel free to explore, Leo Wizard was clearly issuing a dismissal. Hikaru could feel it too. His body and consciousness were slowly rising, a clear sign that he was about to return to the human world. "I'm sorry, Amon. I blew it." As the sensation of fading set in, Echo said to Amon with genuine regret. She had been too hasty. "It's fine." Amon replied softly. Aster frowned slightly. Sartorius had told him that he might encounter a turning point in this dimension, a catalyst to grow stronger, a crossroads of destiny. He looked at Hikaru and couldn't help but let out a quiet sigh. "Director, it seems I'll be attending school properly next semester. Could you ask Vice-Chancellor Growler to arrange a private dormitory for me?" "Ha ha. Professor Growler will be thrilled." "Why the sudden change of heart?" "Destiny." He drew a wistful breath. "Is that so?" Hikaru heard the word destiny from Aster's lips again, yet this time he sensed none of the old rejection or bitterness toward the concept. Because Aster's destiny was guiding him to become the person he wanted to be. Aster understood now why Sartorius had told him he would find new possibilities here. A hero might sacrifice to gain power, but never by sacrificing someone else. Hikaru said nothing more to Aster. The two of them felt something like the gurgling of bubbles, like the sound of water, and then slowly faded from this dimension. When Hikaru came to, he was back in his workshop. Chapter 545, Be Careful of the Artist. Back at the Cosmo workshop, the clinking and clanging of metal echoed endlessly through the halls. While Hikaru had been away in the world of the forgotten, something had been proceeding in orderly fashion inside the workshop. Before the alchemical crucible, Alcest and Witchcrafter Hain were carefully directing the workshop spirits as they layered materials. Crystal, who normally focused on nothing but his own work and never involved himself in other spirits' affairs, was watching the crucible with rare nervousness. Tiara stood beside him, yawning, looking thoroughly uninterested. "What are you so nervous about? Are you going to doubt my calculations?" "That, of course not, Lady Tiara. It's just..." Crystal didn't know how to respond. He was simply nervous. Tiara huffed twice. The moment she sensed Hikaru's return, she shifted her attention away from the crucible. Her exchange with Crystal had been nothing more than an offhand remark after noticing how tense he looked. As several mechanical spirits transported metals and gemstone-trimmed fabrics, depositing them precisely into the crucible. A cry of "perfect" burst from Alceste. He cheered with excitement. It wasn't gold, but he had taken yet another step forward on his path. Today, he had transmuted metal into gemstone. Boom! The crucible ceased operation. Massive amounts of steam and residue were drawn out. As the firelight illuminated the interior, Hayne gently wiped the sweat from her brow. Success! She thought to herself, elated. She had successfully achieved fusion through craft magic outside of Witchcrafter Bystreet. As the two spirits in charge of coordination finished their work, the crucible slowly opened. A graceful figure stepped out from within. She wore a cloak similar to Crystal's, but her figure was far more slender and elegant. Gold filigree decorated her from head to toe. This was Gem Knight Lapis, the subject of the modification experiment. But now, she was not only much taller than before, her appearance had fully matured. She had transformed into a fusion monster, Gem Knight Lapis Lazuli. The moment she emerged, she burst into excited cheers, nothing like the withdrawn loner she used to be. She had become far more lively and energetic. It worked! Hikaru breathed a sigh of relief. Naturally. I oversaw it personally, Tiara said, tilting her chin upward. She hadn't initially understood why Lapis couldn't evolve into a fusion monster. In truth, Tiara wasn't omniscient. Just as she had never understood why Flame Swordsman and Dark Flare Knight couldn't evolve for so long. In her assessment, they had more than enough power to qualify. Though Tiara was indeed a god, she wasn't the conceptual omniscient, omnipotent type. She was a god of ecosystems and the cycle of life. But if someone identified the problem, like Hikaru, who had been researching and stumbled upon the situation where Shad doll creatures had been forcibly fused into chaos phantasms, and then set about extracting those creatures and investigating until he discovered the root cause, then Tiara would know how to help resolve things. Before this, she had assumed Lapis simply didn't want to go on adventures with Hikaru's team, that she wanted to return to the Gem Knight Order. So Tiara hadn't bothered. But then Hayne explained that Lapis's problem wasn't an inability to evolve or insufficient energy. Her evolutionary direction had been forcibly locked in place. She was stuck. When had Tiara ever encountered something like that? In her world, a Gem Knight or any other creature could fuse however it pleased, could become whatever form of life it wished. Because that was how things had been designed from the very beginning. She had used her own techniques to revive Winda, then made her a herald, naming her Midrash. After that, Midrash had successfully helped revive Tiara herself, and from that point on, Tiara hadn't paid Midrash much attention. The result was that the fully revived Midrash, no longer under Tiara's control, had gone back to living with her old friends and family. The concept of unable to transform simply didn't exist in Tiara's mind. The environmental modification machines she had built with her bare hands were proof enough. As long as any species resonated with those machines, different evolutionary paths could be created. How could there be limitations? All she could say was that spirits, as a form of life, still had many aspects of their ecology she couldn't understand. But regardless, now that the problem had been identified, for her, the solution was simple. Because it was straightforward. With her current abilities, altering her own state of life was effortless. She had demonstrated it in front of Serena before. Forget mechanical life forms, she could even transform herself into a carbon-based organism. With Hayne's expert guidance, it took Tiara only a few days to figure out how to convert Lapis into her Gem Knight state and even a universal spirit state. While she was at it, Tiara decided she might as well recreate a possibility from her memories so Lapis wouldn't seem so out of place among Hikaru's spirits. After all, Lapis was one of the few spirits whose fusion form didn't belong to her own faction's fusion monsters. Originally, Hikaru should have overseen this process himself, but since the world of the Forgotten could only be accessed at specific times, Tiara told Hikaru to go on his own and leave everything to her. If she didn't show these feeble mortal creatures what she was capable of, being a god would be far too boring. Thank you so much, Lady Tiara. Lapis bowed excitedly. Now I can finally volunteer for battle. Tiara nodded silently, waving Lapis off with a dismissive gesture. She was fond of Lapis, admired Crystal, and was satisfied with Winda, referring to their originals. Though this Crystal wasn't her Crystal and this Lapis wasn't her Lapis, she didn't find it particularly important anymore. Having experienced so much alongside Hikaru and watched so many duels, she had made her peace with the whole dual terminal spirits situation. Being happy was what mattered most. "Thank you for your hard work." Hikaru thanked Tiara from nearby. Ha ha. Tiara laughed 2 genuine laughs. Because the timing was so tight, Hikaru hadn't dared set aside time to personally oversee the experiment on Lapis with Hain and the others. He had already contacted Anselm and Mayeta Hayato, scheduling a meeting. He had to leave for Industrial Illusions within days, and the World of the Forgotten required arriving at a precise time. Not knowing how long that side would take, he'd had no choice but to divide the tasks. Whatever else could be said about Tiara, when it came to transforming life forms, she was one of the most qualified gods across multiple dimensions. Her colleague Sophia probably wasn't even as specialized as her in this area. So on this matter, Hikaru had absolute confidence in Tiara. "If I'd known it would be this simple, you should have just handed the whole thing to Alcest." Tiara folded her arms, looking thoroughly bored. "I watched that duel. That world's future trajectory seems to have been locked in by your fusion. But that kind of process will be extremely slow. If I were there, I could accelerate the entire dimension's evolution effortlessly. You haven't fully recovered yet, and you want to waste your power like that?" Hikaru spread his hands. "Force your way through the resentment and suffering of every spirit in an entire dimension, then speed up the world's evolution?" He saw Tiara raise an eyebrow, looking quite displeased. "Fine, I admit you could probably pull it off. But you're not fully resurrected. How long would you need to hibernate after something like that?" "Ha! A god's power is far greater than you imagine, Hikaru. As my chosen one, you should have faith in me." She glanced sideways. Yes. Hikaru chuckled, responding casually. He could tell that Tiara, having transformed Lapis's life state in front of so many spirits at the Cosmo Workshop, was very keen on asserting her authority. She was even willing to make bold claims like that. Still, there was no need to completely call her bluff. Claims like those, once she was fully resurrected, she might actually be able to back them up. At the very least, letting Tiara appear more impressive in the spirit's eyes wasn't a bad thing. He noticed that even the Frightfur and Phantom spirits watching the procedure were visibly stunned, whispering among themselves. This mysterious god called Tiara really did have some ability. No wonder Hikaru trusted her so much. Taking a transformation that should theoretically require countless hours and complex processes, and forcing it through in just a few hours or even less, with zero side effects, as if the spirit called Lapis had been born that way all along. That kind of performance. Reshaping an entire world's ecosystem and cycle of life, maybe it wasn't impossible after all? Impressive. Quite impressive. Hikaru didn't dwell on these questions. He took out his previous deck. In addition to the memento cards he had obtained earlier, other cards from the World of the Forgotten, from Memento Mictlan, had come along as well. Hikaru carefully removed the forgotten cards from his deck and placed them in his side deck to prevent super polymerization from transforming them. If all went as expected, these monster cards would eventually become memento spirits. Until then, he would let them experience the world of the living, of those who are cherished, once more. Mementotlin Mace. Tiara leaned in, peering at the new monster in Hikaru's deck. Nice design. I like it. Though its skeletal angel aesthetic differed from the infernoid mechanical demon style, it had its own charm. The design was quite interesting, right within her preferences. Hikaru nodded in agreement. He had always liked the Memento series card art as well. Speaking of card art, Hikaru pulled out Keeper of Dragon Magic. The monster, whose card art had a distinct style that was clearly drawn based on him in an anime-inspired fashion, glowed with a faint purple light. A bit of preparation, and it would be time to take the ship to Industrial Illusions. Hikaru spent 2 days readjusting at the Cosmo workshop. On one hand, Tierra told him to cleanse the spirit resentment clinging to him and heal some of his wounds. On the other, he was also continuing to lay low. Though the frenzy surrounding him at Duel Academy had begun to subside, there were still plenty of persistent reporters. Before the semester started, Hikaru preferred some peace and quiet. Aside from finding time to tell Professor Growler that Aster might be attending school next semester, Hikaru spent his days studying the Emerald Tablet. Honestly, he was a little surprised. He had always assumed he had completely mastered all of the alchemy Professor Banner had left behind. But after fully obtaining Trismegistus, he discovered that several pages were still sealed from him. It wasn't that he couldn't break the seal. Rather, after solving the puzzle, he found that Professor Banner had left a message asking Hikaru not to break the second seal. In other words, could these be the dimensional coordinates related to the mastermind behind the splitting of the spirit worlds? Hikaru suspected that was possible. Among them was a coordinate page that Hikaru vaguely recalled but which had been buried deep. Eldlika's domain. He doesn't recommend I go there either? Hikaru naturally knew that Professor Banner was acquainted with Eldlik the Golden Lord. After all, both Jaden's Golden Captain and Hikaru's Golden Eyes idol had studied under him for a time. He flipped through a few more pages. The Dark World Dimension, Shadow Dystopia, and he called his own? He could more or less understand the first one. But why the second? Especially he called his own. Hikaru was surprised to find that Professor Banner had left a note after this coordinate, the only special annotation in the entire Emerald Tablet. Artists are all lunatics. Hikaru was bewildered. He recalled that this was just an ordinary card from the 5Ds era. He hadn't expected Professor Banner to give the École des Zones Dimension such a review. Even as Hikaru said his goodbyes to Professor Growler and boarded the ship bound for Industrial Illusions, this was still on his mind. The more someone tells you not to look, the more curious you become. Especially since Hikaru already knew about the Eldlik dimension. Seeing his alchemy teacher specifically mark certain dimensions as places he didn't want Hikaru to visit only made him more curious. And among all those curiosities, École des Zones seemed unremarkable at first glance, yet it had been placed alongside a collection of high-level dimensions and even given special attention. That made it all the more intriguing. More importantly, the president of Industrial Illusions, the father of dual monsters, the bearer of the Millennium Eye, Maximilian Pegasus. He was a genuine artist. A painter of extraordinary talent. A few days later, Hikaru disembarked with the other passengers and looked up to see Anselm waiting for him. Anselm wore his usual smile, showing no trace of his private troubles, and greeted Hikaru warmly. Well, well. Look who it is. If it isn't the world's #1 fusion master, Hikaru Amagi. Hikaru stiffened as he walked down the gangway, unusually failing to respond smoothly to his friend. The reason was simple. All around the port, chibi versions of Hikaru were hanging as balloon decorations. The absurd grins and exaggerated proportions were enough to make even Hikaru, a man who could proclaim his beliefs before crowds of thousands, feel a twinge of embarrassment. Not far off, the Paradox brothers were waving at Hikaru, while Maeda Hayato scratched the back of his head awkwardly, clearly not used to this kind of scene either. Ha ha ha. Surprised? Anselm suddenly burst out laughing. The president prepared all of this especially for you. Pretty fun, right? Ha ha ha. Anyway, come on, Amagi. The president has been waiting for you for quite some time. Waiting for you, the pure fusion duelist who left him truly amazed. That wraps up this part of What If Fusion Deck User in a Different Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.